In today's video, I'll be showing you 7 tips on how to build the perfect base in SCP-3008 on Roblox. If you're a longtime viewer of mine, you may remember that I've actually made a video like this in the past, but it was a really bad video.
Roblox SCP-3008 is a game about building and surviving in an infinite IKEA.
Since it was so bad and old, I wanted to remake that video with better tips and more information, and of course, better editing. So let's get straight into it. First things first, before you start building, you should always head to your settings by pressing Q, then go to Controls. And under Controls, you'll find Snap to Grid Range. This option will make it so whenever you're placing something by another build, like a wall, it'll automatically snap to that wall, or whatever it is, and increasing it will increase the range of where the object will snap. So let me give you an example. Here, I'm going to place this pallet by my other pallet that I've placed down, and you can see whenever I put them together, nothing happens, meaning I have to manually try and place them side by side, which almost always leads to unsymmetrical and weird-looking walls like this. Now, if we just increase the snap to grid range a bit, just up to 0.25, then you'll see whenever the walls are close, they'll automatically snap together, making it much easier to build flat and good-looking walls. It's easier to see this when you're actually placing them in game, but if I turned up the snap to grid range to 1, which is an insane amount by the way, you can really see how it works, but I would only recommend having the snap to grid range at 0.25. Anyways, let's move on to the next tip, which will be the best spots to build your base. For the first spot, we obviously have the industrial shelves. This is easily the most popular place that people build their bases in, and for a good reason. These plots have their own floor and roofs. They have a ton of pallets, which are the best object for building pretty much anything in this game. And there are a ton of ways you can build your base in this plot. There's also a bunch of ladders in here, which can allow you to build a base on the top of these shelves. Another plot that's good for building are these ones. They have their own mini walls along with a roof, plus some lights. The only downside is that you'll have to find objects to fill in the rest of the walls, but besides that, it's a pretty good plot to build in. Next up, we have these ones with the rock painting. These plots have huge walls in the corner, which makes it so you don't have to get that many objects to fill in the empty space. This plot also has a bunk bed, which can act as a temporary base in itself, as long as you cover the front and back. You're pretty much safe in it. Next, we have the food court. This is another obviously great spot to build in or around, since you get pretty much an endless supply of food. But that's kind of the only good thing about it. There's not anything you can use to build with in this plot, and it's pretty ugly. The only upside is that you get free food every in-game Monday. Finally, another great plot is simply any pillar on the map. This is because it provides a really nice area to build on, and you can make some pretty cool sky bases on this. Of course, it doesn't really provide anything else besides a nice place to build on. The next thing we're going to go over is some of the best building materials that you should be using in your builds. First, we of course have pallets. This is the most popular and most used building material in the game because it's so good at pretty much everything. I can't really think of a downside of the pallets since it's really versatile, besides the fact that you can only find them at the industrial shelves plot. Next, we have bunk beds. These are great for the reason I said before. They can be used as temporary bases whenever you're in a struggle. As long as you just cover both sides of the bed, then you're safe. This can also be used as a wall, but it's not that good at it. Next up, we have TVs. These are good because they are long and flat, making pretty good walls. Plus, if you ever need some extra light, you can simply turn on the TV instead of having to look for lights themselves. Next, we have bookshelves, wardrobes, and clothing racks. Bookshelves and wardrobes spawn together in the same plot, and these plots spawn a lot, with 4 wardrobes and bookshelves on each side. Even though clothing racks spawn on a different plot, I thought they were similar enough to include them with these. Finally, we have queen beds. These are great because they are huge. The downside is that they only spawn in groups of 2, and they're pretty ugly if you're trying to make a nice base. I also wanted to include some honorable mentions that I forgot to show when recording the video, which are coffee tables and kitchen tables. Both are great for building and spawn pretty frequently. Now, we'll be going over how to properly decorate your base. There are a few things that you should always have in your base, starting with lights. There are a ton of different lights that you can use, but some of the best ones are these small work lights, which are best for bigger bases, or lighting up the outside of your base. Then there's light strips, which are best for smaller bases, and they also add a cozy vibe to your base, so I'd recommend using it if that's what you're trying to go for. Of course, you can also go with the basic lamps, which also work just as well, but I'll be using light strips for this example. And here's something that I made. It's not that great since it was pretty rushed, but it gets the point across. Next up, we have carpets. These aren't as necessary as something like lights, but it helps make a base feel more like a home, especially in industrial shelf plots, where the metal floor kind of ruins the vibe of a base. There are a ton of different types of carpets you can use for any size base you may have. Then we have other decorations like chairs and beanbags. I personally like using beanbags because, like the light strips, they give off a cozy feeling in a base, so adding a beanbag or even a chair and table would be a good addition to your base. Then we have plushies, by far the most important part of anyone's base, and are absolutely necessary in whatever you're building. There are 4 types of plushies, or whatever you're supposed to call these, but you need to have at least one in your base at all times. I personally always try to find a jungle skog whenever I can, since if you didn't know, it actually repels all enemies away from your base. Adding smaller, more random decorations like this pencil light also helps with making the base feel more alive. Plus, I really like this pencil light. Then, we also have toys, which is a staple for anyone's base. If you didn't know, toy plots have a 20% chance to spawn somewhere on the map, and they always spawn with at least 4 toys and one of these cubbies, which is great to show off your toys. It is pretty huge though, so it's only good to put this in a bigger base. And if your base is small like mine, you can also use a bookshelf or a metal cabinet to showcase your toys. Next, we have plants. In my opinion, adding plants are pretty important, since they make any base feel more lively, and they fit in almost all types of bases. And finally, we have wall decorations, like this very menacing painting here of the rock-eating waffles. Other wall decorations can include shelves, toys, like the shark I put up earlier, or even carpets, which can act like paintings. Now here's the before and after. As you can see, adding more and more small decorations can really improve your base and make it feel more alive. Even though this one was rushed, it still looks a lot better than before. Next up, we have different types of doors you can use for your base. I know this may seem insignificant, and it kind of is for most people, which is why this part will be short, and you can skip it if you want, but there's some people, including me, who hate having to place something in front of their doorway every night to stop the SCPs from getting in. So instead, I'll show you a few doorways you can use to stop having to do that. First, we have the crouch doorway, which is as it sounds. The only way to get in is by crouching, and it stops 90% of SCPs from entering your base. The only downside is that it cannot stop some of the super short SCPs from getting in. Another doorway you can use is the sliding door. If you just lower this middle wall a bit, it makes it so no SCPs can get in at all, and you can only get in by sliding. This doorway is pretty new, since sliding wasn't a mechanic back then, so not many people know about this one. The final doorway we have is also called a sliding doorway, since this was the original doorway almost everybody used before the new sliding doorway was made. Once sliding was a real mechanic. This doorway is still used today, and it's great because no SCP can get in, and the only way to enter is by sliding your body through. You can also add a tiny roof to stop SCPs from jumping over. Now we'll be going over some different types of roofs you can use to defend yourself against SCPs jumping on top of your base. This is a pretty big problem, especially with newer players since they forget to add a roof, or they do it really poorly, so in the end the SCPs get inside of their base, which is something you never want. First, we obviously have the basic flat roof. This works fine, but SCPs will usually stand on top of your base and wait for you to leave, which kinda sucks, and you probably wouldn't want this. The second and best way to defend your base from SCPs from entering is by using ladders. These can act as a railing, protecting you from falling on the inside and defending your base from SCPs on the outside. You can also use this on balconies or multiple story bases, so it's a good thing to know whenever building. Adding ladders adds protections and usually makes your base look cooler. Now we'll be going over supplies. Having a bunch of supplies is very important for every base. And when I say supplies, I mean food, water, and of course medkits. But not everybody knows where to find these, or what are the best ones to be collecting, or even where to store them. So I'll go over all of that. There are 4 different plots that can spawn consumables, not including the medkit plot. Now, most people just grab whatever they see, which can work, but it's better if you grab only the best consumables. The consumables that you should be prioritizing from best to worst are meatballs, then ice cream, then burgers, and then Bloxy Cola. From there you can grab whatever else you want, but those 4 are the best ones you should always get. Then there's, of course, medkits. Medkits have their own plot where 4 of them can spawn, and there's always 1 medkit at a food court. You should always, and I mean always, have at least 1 to 3 medkits on you at all times, since you never know when you may get hurt and will need a medkit. Now, when it comes to storing food, a lot of people just throw it on the floor and move on, but I think that looks ugly. Instead, you can throw your food inside of a bathtub or a shelf to make it look a bit more organized. And if you want to go a step further, you can individually move each consumable to make it look less like a mess. Anyways, I hope this video has inspired and helped you guys make better builds. If you've enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as it would be greatly appreciated since we're so close to 10K subscribers. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comments below and I'll try to answer. Anyways, see ya.